We are on the precipice of a new iteration of the Civilization franchise. Set to release on February 11th, 2025, Civilization VII promises to bring sweeping changes in gameplay mechanics that, from early previews, has fans of the franchise wondering if they will still recognize or even want to play their favorite game. Has the promise of building a civilization to stand the test of time run its course? I have news for you. The Civilization franchise is bigger than and can survive a few questionable ideas and will continue to be the best turn-based strategy game available on any gaming platform. Fans of Civilization, do not panic. Welcome to Civ VI Stories, where we explore alternatives to history through the lens of the world's most addictive video game. Today I want to share my impressions of what we know about the forthcoming Civilization VII. First, let me state that Civilization VII will be a weaker entry to the Civilization franchise, especially its vanilla release. As someone who has been a dedicated Civilization junkie since 1992, I have noticed a trend whereby even-numbered Civ games are the best and odd-numbered entries tend to be weaker. Everyone has their opinion, but my ranking of the major Civ series games goes as follows: a tie at the top between Civ 6 and Civ 4, Civ 2, Civ 3 and OG Civ tied, and then Civ 5 at the bottom of the list. Admittedly, Civ 5 is the game in the series that I have the least experience with. Civ 4 was so good that, even when Civ 5 came out, I preferred it to the new game. I know that the DLCs and expansions were a big deal and helped make Civ 6 into what it became, but I never got hooked. Then Civ 6 came along and everything changed. I have been obsessed ever since, reaching for just one more turn for the last 8 years. It's easy to argue that every entry to the Civilization franchise starts out as a weaker version of the game than its fully fleshed out predecessor. But I am basing my statement strictly on what I remember about my first experience with the vanilla version of each game. Civ 6, which is now my most played and favorite entry in the series, was amazing from my very first game, and it only got better. Also, the first time I played Civ 4 and heard Baba Yetu, I was in heaven. Civ 5, less so, and I expect to have a similar reaction to Civ 7 just based on its placement in the series. So, in spite of this initial pessimism, will Civ 7 be worth the money? Will I play it? Yes, to both questions. No video game has captivated my attention and brought me as much joy as the Civilization series. They have earned my trust and my money. But I do expect to keep playing Civilization 6 while I explore the mechanics of this new version of the game, and don't expect to kick Civilization 6 completely to the curb on the day of release of Civ 7. Civ 6 is just too good a game. Moreover, I will be eagerly anticipating the release of Civilization VIII, or Civilization Infinity, as I see its design eventually shaping out and releasing sometime in 2030-ish. As I stare into my crystal ball, I feel certain that Civilization Infinity will be the definitive version of the game, the apotheosis of every great idea that Civ developers have ever had, and instead of new versions of the game then being released, Civilization Infinity will be a modular game that is forever expanded upon rather than broken down and built back up from the ground. The reason why I believe that the Civilization franchise is safe in light of my suspicion of this upcoming entrant is that what makes the Civilization franchise so strong is the fact that its players are so dedicated to the game, understand what makes their game so fun, articulate to the developers what that is, who then sensitively internalize that feedback and implement it into the game to ultimately give their fans what they want: an engrossing game that is complex, that requires looking at the rules of the game from different angles, and challenges its players at multiple stages to outwit their opponents. Now, let's take a look at some of the upcoming features of Civilization VII, the philosophy behind their inclusion, and whether or not they are steps forward or backward for the franchise. In so doing, we will explore the game's graphical design, the game's philosophy of how it has developed over time, how that philosophy has integrated itself into new mechanics to challenge players, and the mechanics themselves. If a game is good, then there are a lot of things that players will forgive developers for, even if they could be improved. Players adapt to the environment in which developers put them and are, more often than not, concentrated on the game itself rather than if a scout can pet the dog or not. Those are nice touches, but they don't matter. At least, it's not why we keep playing again and again. So, first, let's talk about design. Graphics, UI, things like that, and what to expect from Civ 7. There has been a long-standing and polarized debate between the merits of Civ 5 versus Civ 6's respective art styles. Some players did not appreciate Civ 6's turn toward a more cartoonish and caricatured art style. Fans of Civ 5 already appear to be praising Civ 7's apparent return to a more realistic-looking world and art style. First, let me just say that the Civ VII world looks gorgeous, but there are a couple of things that we need to talk about. Okay, this.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
This is the first thing that Civ developers will change. Maybe even before the game releases, because I'm pretty sure that I'm not the first to point this out. I don't know who came up with this idea, but boy, oh boy, did they drop the ball. What you will notice about my video here is that I am keen to address philosophy. What is behind the developers' decisions for how they built the game for players? This one screenshot is a major departure from the philosophy upon which the Civilization franchise was built, and it is a bridge too far. It tampers with that core 33% of the game that never changes. The change is subtle enough that some Civ fanatics don't know and can't articulate why they hate it. They just know that it's wrong. The reason that this doesn't work is that whenever you play Civ and you play as Gandhi or Caesar or Alexander or Tamar or Jadwiga, you play as them, but you are still you. All you do is lead their armies, build their civilization, and use their special abilities. But you are you. I am a 45-year-old dude from Canada. Do I want to be Sunduck? No. Do I like the idea of getting a +3 culture and science bonus for each governor promotion in my cities with an established governor? Yes, I do. Once the leader screen disappears, I am me interacting with the other leaders in the game. So seeing the alleged me standing across the room from my adversary is just wrong. It's wrong. As someone with a degree in anthropology, I need to point out the cultural complications here as well. Presumably, as someone from Canada, I expect to see myself on the left and my adversary on the right, the way that I read. But not all cultures read left to right and are going to be put off when their diplomatic screen world gets flipped around. Plus, if I play as Benjamin Franklin, who is famously obese and looks about halfway through his syphilis diagnosis here, is that how I want to see myself? Benjamin Franklin, influential, intellectual, political philosopher, and statesman. Sure. Founding father? Absolutely. Do I want to see myself as being John Malkovich into that 70-year-old fat-ass frame? Not as much. Older versions of the game gave players the freedom to freestyle their own civilization once they had chosen their leader in Civ. You could literally choose Alexander of Greece, but call yourself Gonzo of the Muppets, and all the leaders in the game would do the same. It was the expansionist and seafaring traits you wanted. The leader was just a name and face that separated other leaders and their traits. You took the traits and then continued to be you. Developers at Firaxis, hear me now. Don't do this. Have other leaders look you in the eye when they tell you off. Don't die on this hill. It's an easy change, at least philosophically. What's involved from a coding, game building, and graphical perspective, I have no idea, but you need to go back and fix this because it is a major misstep. As we have seen in first look videos that have come out, this shot of Confucius, this is what we're looking for. The second point I want to make about design is built on this screenshot. This should have been the beacon leading the way for the design of all of the deeper UI elements in the game. This should be the North Star for Civ VII and its expansions and future iterations of the game. However, within the game, they appear to have turned away from this design and gone with muted grays for the tone of their UI and dialogue panels. This concept of text etched on marble is gorgeous. Whoever came up with this, give yourself a pat on the back. Whoever said, let's make the menus fit the current gaming aesthetic so that they are sleek and gray. Shame on you. Civilization sets the trends. It should not seek to follow them, ever. One of the main concepts of civilization is the idea of building. You build the pyramids and the Colosseum. You build a civilization to stand the test of time. When I saw the sneak peek trailer, it hinted at the idea of building being more important to the gameplay than ever before. They've even started using the tagline, build something you believe in. And this idea of building with something as strong and important to the bedrock of culture as marble is an incredible idea that, even if it hasn't actually been there in the game before, you felt that it was. The design for the game cover was the realization of that. At the heart of Civ VI's design is the feeling of parchment. You feel it in the way that names of rivers and seas are written on the game map and how each addition to your era score is sketched on your timeline throughout the game. This concept of your civilization's history being chiseled into marble could have been an amazing way to build on top of that philosophy and could have permeated throughout the game. It could have reinforced how the game is built in layers, but that your culture is etched in the permanence of smooth-hewn rock. Instead, it appears they turned away from it for the UI. It's difficult to say whether or not graphical elements such as this are set in stone, pun intended, but it feels like an area that they can improve upon. I want to turn now to discussing what I think could be one of the most positive changes to the game, and that is the division of the game into 3 distinct ages. Obviously, this change builds on the Civilization VI era divisions mechanic, which was one of the positive improvements to Civ VI that was not in the vanilla version. I think I heard Ed Beach say once that he didn't always have time to play a whole game of Civ, but he could usually make time to play an era. And that's kind of how I play the game now. Eras are good bookmarks. For someone with full-time work that can't play overnight as I did when I was a teenager, keen to blow off the school day, they are points to lay the game down and get back to work. They are also chapters in my story as I play. Although this was a positive change to the Civ 6 game, it wasn't perfect, and what players found was that their favorite parts of the game, like the ancient and classical era, felt short compared to the more complex but often less interesting and engrossing atomic and information eras. What I imagine the philosophy is here is transitioning the Civilization game into 3 smaller games that we have all become used to and have names for. The goal, I imagine, is to give Civ 7's early game, mid-game, and late game more equal weight, and where each phase of the game is given a clear focus and mission. The early game is where players map out their country and build the foundation of their empire. The mid-game is where players cross continents and discover how civilizations around the globe have built the foundations of their empires. And the late game is where players strategize through diplomatic complexities in a world where there's nothing left to explore and try to outwit their enemies using the bonuses that they have built up in earlier ages to win the game. Really, nothing has changed, save for these phases of the game now being more clearly delineated. By giving more equal weight to these 3 phases of the game, it promises to make each one more fun to play, and the histories that players build even more compelling, like mini-games within the game. The early, mid, and late game have always existed. Now they have been given a real personality in being named the Age of Antiquity, the Age of Exploration, and the Modern Age. The concept for this channel is storytelling and the retelling of history through the lens of the game. Where the paths of a player's history through the game diverge from literal history is what makes the game so fun. How those 2 worlds, true history and the history you live through the game, the way in which they weave together and stretch apart are why we play. So, how the game inevitably integrates this mechanic will make or break the experience. There's a lot riding on it, and I believe there's a lot of promise here, even if I worry that at release, it is far, far from perfect. And there are a few key elements that point to my skepticism. First, let's talk about rubber banding. From what I understand, each age will end with a crisis. This is a game mechanic that worries me. In Civ 6, Dark and Golden Ages were earned. Sure, there were times when fighting against the AI on Deity, you felt that you were being nerfed. It's scripting that kept the player invested and prevented them from running away with the game. It pits the human player at disadvantages, holes that we have to dig our way out of. Challenges are part of the fun. But an understood gameplay mechanic that is scheduled with the dawn of a new age feels more like an imposition than fun. What makes the way that human players retell their histories of the game so enjoyable is that it is their involvement in the game, not the game itself, that determines it. It is the human player's interaction with the AI or other human players that create the strife. Some random elements like meteorites, floods, or eruptions are fine, but a ticking clock that alters history and that the player simply has to wait for and play through? That doesn't sound right. Of course, if you have played the game well, you want to be able to continue and build on that strong game. Scripting crises as rubber banding sounds like overt nerfing. The developer livestream revealed the ability to choose legacies that have been earned during the game and then get spent like currency as players transition into new ages, similar to choosing a dedication at the start of each era. It remains to be seen, but I don't think that the right approach from a rubber banding standpoint was taken here. There are even precedents available to follow to make this phase of the game more compelling. In my fantasy sports league, as with pro sports, the team that finishes at the bottom of the standings gets to choose the first player in the upcoming draft. It's a way to give them a chance of getting back into the competition by being able to select the best available asset. This mechanic already exists in the religion side of Civ 6, but in reverse, whereby those in the lead get to choose the best available options that then disappear once they are chosen. Instead of simply choosing from a list of available legacies and using currencies to procure them, watching rivals select legacies ahead of you, or being reminded that you are at the foot of the game by having all of the legacies available to you, might be a more interesting way to rubber band the game. For example, the Age of Antiquity might end with a history written by Thomas Aquinas, who ranks the world's greatest civilizations. Every civilization is then presented with a list of legacies, and each civilization gets to draft their legacies in reverse order of those rankings. So, if Thomas Aquinas says you're losing, you choose first. If he says you're first overall, you choose last. Once a civ picks a legacy, then it's gone. It could also be a great way for civs to choose legacies that suit their needs and their environment in the game, as well as ways to distinguish and set apart each civilization and set them on paths that converge or diverge from actual history. What will also happen during age changes will be the evolution of one civilization. This is another area equally fraught with potential and problems. On the one hand, watching your civilization evolve from ancient Rome to the Normans to the French is cool, but the potential to be Egypt, then the Maya, and then Russia would be weird. From what it seems, you choose your civilization and put it on a path. That path can also diverge based on how players play the game. There is a certain evolution of each civilization that I can get on board with, but I think there might have been better, more subtle ways of dealing with a civilization's evolution than having players outright choose and change the identity of their civilization. For example, when you meet Philip II of Spain for the first time in Civ VI, there he is, clad in his Renaissance-era armor, or Wilfrid Laurier of Canada is wearing a 19th century waistcoat. It doesn't matter when you meet them, they look and speak the same. Personally, I might have preferred to see an evolution of the civilizations and their leaders around me, rather than an evolution or straying of my civilization in the game mechanics within which I play. Let me explain. Instead of grandiose changes to the civ you choose at the beginning of the game, why not meet Victoria and have her refer to herself as Empress of the Anglo-Saxons? Discuss diplomacy with her wearing tribal clothes of the early eras. We know that she will be leader of the English one day. Just referring to herself as an Anglo-Saxon gives the gameplay a bit more of a link to historical context. So why not watch her evolve into a leader of what she calls the English and begin to don an Elizabethan frock as you enter the Age of Discovery? In the modern age, maybe she wears a pantsuit and refers to the state she leads as Great Britain. See what I'm getting at? Conversely, imagine you're the leader of Rome. Remember, you are still you, so not Augustus. But other leaders can say things on the diplomacy screen about how they do not fear your Etruscan warriors, your Roman legions, your Venetian warships, or your Italian mercenaries. In this way, the evolution of each civilization happens more organically. Bonuses or legacies aside, attributing those bonuses and legacies exclusively to a certain civilization that a player can choose to morph into, like the as-stated potential of Hatshepsut of Egypt becoming Hatshepsut of the Mongols, feels like taking the idea of an evolving civilization too far. I am all for Hammurabi leading the Japanese, if it's an option in the game that you can toggle like in Civ IV, but rewarding or nerfing players for choosing a streamlined path over another more erratic path feels pointless and punitive. Why would a human player make a decision in the game that hurts their civilization for the sake of playing in a way that maybe makes the history twist and turn in a more interesting way? Once the game starts and the initial decision of who to play as has passed, players are just going to do what they need to do to win. Plus, taking an ancient civilization like Rome or Egypt or Sumer or the Maya and building space rockets with them is fun. Making them go extinct in the game just because they evolved into different cultures over history, real history, is dumb. Remember, where real history and civ history diverge and converge is what makes the game fun. The idea of giving one civilization a bonus toward building a particular wonder also sounds like a bad idea, and an area where they have confused the good and the bad of the game's history diverging from real history. England building the pyramids is freaking awesome. Mongols building the Colosseum, also awesome. But now I worry that Egypt will build the pyramids every game, that I will always find Machu Picchu in Incan territory, or that Germany will always control the Ruhr Valley. That predictable playing out of the game kills the game. Of course, it remains to be seen how this will actually play out, but it is my understanding that certain civilizations get a bonus toward building certain wonders. A different way to approach the civilization evolution and age changes could have been to put leaders into an ages pool. There are no shortage of great, or even not so great, leaders from around the world. The dawning of a new age, or even just the implementation of a new government, could lead to the election of a new leader. The English could be led by King Arthur. Then with the dawning of the Age of Discovery, they can choose to elect leaders like Richard the Lionheart, Henry VIII, Richard III, Oliver Cromwell, or Queen Elizabeth. Each could have a different unique bonus, agenda, etc. Then, in the modern age, the AI could elect Winston Churchill, Queen Victoria, Margaret Thatcher, King George III, or any number of heads of state or prominent figures from the 1700s onward. You, as the human player, would always stay you. but you could choose any one of those unique bonuses associated with that leader that is elected with each age change. All this being said, I think the move forward for Civilization is to uncouple leader traits from the human player, where one does not inhabit the body of the world leader like Frederick Barbarossa, but merely adopts the traits and characteristics of their leadership style. A rival world leader could address the human player as such. "Oh, treacherous, emotional husky, horse lord of the Mongol Empire, I see you have studied the code of Caesar and know how to watch your back. We shall strike at you head on." Here, the human player can put in their own name, lead the civilization of their choosing, and that may have grown out of the code or attributes of a leader from a totally different civilization. There's a lot of ways to approach this aspect of the game, and it has a lot of potential, but based on what I have seen, I have misgivings about the current state of these game mechanics, specifically how the ages change and how leaders and civilizations change across the ages. So, even though I am excited about having a more complete feeling in the early and mid game, I'm worried about how these changes affect the feeling of the game's totality. There are areas of the game that have been tweaked and that I am optimistic about. The combat system, for example. I grew up with the stack and didn't care. When they changed to 1 unit per hex, I thought, okay, cool. Then they made cores and armies and added support units, and I was like, fine. Combat is always going to be part of Civilization and has improved with every iteration. I'm pretty sure whatever changes are in store, it will work out for the better. But the commander system does look pretty darn awesome. Settlements that are established begin as towns that can then grow into cities in their own right, or not. This looks to be an intriguing minigame within the game. When will it become more profitable for a settlement to expand and begin to develop its own sphere of influence over being a satellite to another city? It promises to make tall versus wide a far more sophisticated and situational debate. You could have civilizations that play better having a core of megacities that are huge economic engines, versus other civilizations that do better with small but efficient towns that are culturally strong and charming places to visit. It is rumored that towns will be specialized into farming towns, mining towns, military forts, and trade outposts. Maybe there will be more, but it would be nice to see things like cultural and spiritual centers as well. Maybe I'm thinking of towns too much like districts, but perhaps there will be room for growth with regard to how towns and cities can specialize. Of course, with the game not set to release until next year, all of this is wait and see, but I am optimistic. There's a touch of apprehension about not having any workers to tell what to do, since they have been such a key part of Civilization since the game's inception. But I trust that they have been replaced, perhaps, with other, more meaningful minigames and parts to micromanage. What would a Civ game be without something to micromanage? Resource allocation looks to be the big new minigame in Civ, and it looks like it could be fun deciding which resources go to which cities and towns and how to streamline that aspect of the game to benefit your empire. I am curious to see how it plays out, but obviously, being able to use resources in your empire besides having a copy for your empire and selling off supplemental copies in exchange for gold could be a real improvement. Hopefully they find ways to move these around through various specialty towns for different purposes, where a wheat resource in a military town helps build units quicker, in a farming town grows cities quicker, in a trading town boosts gold yields, and in a mining town boosts the number of production specialists, and so on. The last thing I want to talk about is a gameplay mechanic that has been hinted at, and that gives me pause from what we have seen so far, and that is story elements. Storytelling through Civ is at the heart of what this channel is about. It is quite literally what gets this husky so emotional. During the developer livestream, they showed a simple scout walking into a goodie hut and there being a small narrative. Soldiers have just been here, their campfires are still warm, and their supplies are packed in anticipation for their return. However, just now, all is still and quiet. Developers at Firaxis, hear me now. For the moment, you have got this so wrong. I don't know who was in charge, but you have confused storytelling with history telling. Civilization is a game that you are playing that spans over 6,000 years. That one turn, that early in the game in terms of years, is several decades, and you are putting us into the sacred moment over a goodie hut? What are you doing? We are going to receive some kind of reward for being the civilization that discovers this goodie hut, correct? What happened to they agree to join our civilization, +1 population. They introduce us to a new precious resource, +1 new tradable resource. They share with us a precious item of spiritual significance. A holy relic is discovered. Keep it simple and keep it about how a civilization's interaction with the map helped grow the civilization, how it moved it forward. Talking about something so immediate and temporal takes us out of the history of the growth of the civilization, which is about the interaction of our people with other peoples, not a single burning campfire. Now, it may seem that I am harping here on a tiny, insignificant aspect of the game, but it's because I feel that I understand the intent here, and it's what I'm all about, making your history of the game a real history. Imagine you play a game of Monopoly with your friends that you win. There are going to be a few moments in the game that you really remember that helped propel you to that victory. You might remember a particular trade that you made that gave you a monopoly, or when you rolled double sixes and landed directly on free parking. But no one ever scrutinizes every roll, saying, I was a thimble just minding my own business on St. Charles Place when a lowly dog walked past and decided to buy the electric company. Knowing what is significant and how significant it is at the core of the storytelling of the Civilization series. I believe that developers at Firaxis understand this and want to make certain parts of the game to be of greater significance. The development of the era score mechanic was at the heart of this. It now seems to be building itself out, but maybe in the wrong way. I'm sorry to say that I'm a little short on ideas on how to perfect this aspect of the game, but this is the internet, so here I go throwing out a couple of half-baked ideas. I'm going to call my idea Folktales. At its core, as I conceive it, folktales could be similar to a combination of era score or great works, although the way that folktales could be integrated into the game could be separated out from these two mechanics as well. But essentially, a civilization could generate or collect folktales based on major events that happen in any given game. For example, a great general or commander could vanquish another in a battle, like Achilles defeating Hector, whereby one or even both civilizations earn a folktale that builds out their culture in some way. A volcano erupts, killing civilians within a nearby city, but a folktale is written to honor those who survive. A tsunami washes ashore, leveling a coastal city, but a folktale is written and collected by that civilization that becomes a part of their history. Peace is restored between two rivals who have been at war for 1,000 years, and a folktale is written to forge a deeper spirit of unity between the two civilizations. There could be 1,000,001 ways to integrate this kind of idea of building a unique culture through historical events that are played out in the game. As the game progresses to more modern times, folktales could even evolve into news items or prizes that are more relevant in modern times. Perhaps one does not progress from satellite to moon landing to Mars colony to exoplanet expedition, but instead chooses a path, hoping to be the first to earn the notoriety for accomplishing their mission. Perhaps, instead of just earning great artists and musicians, civilizations choose a path to become the first to found the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, or an artists' collective of new media, or the Royal Philharmonic. Perhaps instead of simply dominating militarily the entire world, civilizations build upon their folktales and choose a path of military-industrial complex, or international espionage, or international communication and understanding. They could all be avenues that play off of or counteract each other like a mini-game of rock, paper, scissors. What I imagine Firaxis is trying to do is make events more memorable. What they are trying to achieve is a way of arriving at the end of the game and being able to call back those moments that got you to the end. By the end of any game of Civ VI, no matter how you win, it can be easy to have lost sight of some of those defining moments that happened 150 turns earlier that really helped make it happen. My channel is devoted to changing that by going through the game and picking out key moments that brought my civilization to victory, or even defeat sometimes. Having a way to collect story elements that are less formulaic than hitting certain targets as with era score, and keep them in some sort of pantheon or trophy room that you could build and that becomes part of the culture by which a civilization defines itself, could be really interesting. Playing games of Civ VI, players rarely go back and look at their era score timeline. It becomes just a series of targets that you try to hit, like eurekas or inspirations. It's never presented to us again at the end of the game either. We get a generic cinematic based on our victory condition and then an end screen with our score showing us how well we did. Having something at the end of the game that allows players to relive some of the defining moments of history, like a presentation of the folktales that your civilization built itself around, might be a more positive step forward in the history-telling or storytelling aspect of the game. With the game not set to officially release for several months, all of this is wait and see, but you can be sure that as we lead up to the game's release, I will have my finger on Firaxis' pulse and will be ready to share my points of view on what is sure to be a worthy installment of the Civilization franchise, even if it's one of the odd-numbered, weaker entries in the series. Let me know what you think of some of the upcoming features of Civilization VII in the comments. What are your expectations for how it will rank in the Civilization series? And remember to keep playing and making your own civilization stories, your own amazing paths through history. And I'll see you next time.